Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second session of our eight-part AI webinar series for nonprofits. I'm Aarti Chauhan, and I'm from Nasscom Foundation in NGO Empowerment Vertical, and I'm delighted to have you all of you join us today. At Nasscom Foundation, through our NGO Empowerment Vertical, we work towards strengthening the digital capacity of nonprofits by enabling access to technology, knowledge, and capacity building opportunities that help organizations create greater social impact. As part of the webinar series, our goal is to simplify artificial intelligence for the social sector and help nonprofits understand not only how AI can improve efficiency and decision making, but also how it can be adopted responsibly and meaningfully. In our previous session, we explored we explored the fundamentals of AI and built a foundational understanding of key AI concepts. Today, in our second session on AI ethics, we will discuss the importance of responsible AI usage, ethical considerations, bias in AI systems, and how organizations can create a balanced, thoughtful relationship with AI. We truly hope the series becomes an interactive learning journey where all of us can explore, learn, and grow together. Now, I would like to welcome our speaker of today's session, Jed Adao. Welcome, Jed. Over to you.
Thanks, Artie, and hi everyone. Welcome again. It's been a couple of weeks since we last caught each other. I'm happy to continue this eight-part series. Kind of like Lord of the Rings, but twice over. So before we kick off, I'm gonna share my screen real quick. And just being mindful that that share button is precariously right beside the end event session, which would end everything badly. So, guys, welcome to Using AI Responsibly. Much like what Artie mentioned, last week, the first session was about, okay, let's pull the curtain on AI. How does it operate? What does the jargon mean? And what should we know about its thought process, how it goes from prompt to output. Now it's all about us. We know how it operates. How do we operate around AI, right? What does it mean to answer the question, how do we use AI responsibly? Now, before we do that, just a couple of quick introductions. By the way, I'm Jed. I'm a nonprofit tech consultant for the past 10 plus years. I'm working for a nonprofit called TechSoup. And part of my intro, as always, is I am a real boy. I'm an organic being. I'm not AI generated. I'm part of a nonprofit called TechSoup. We are partners with Nasscom Foundation for the longest time. We ourselves are a nonprofit, and our mission is to empower other nonprofits across the globe in using technology. Joining me here, actually, is a very special guest, Matt. Sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot. Matt is from Info Exchange, also a partner. Matt, maybe you want to give a quick couple of words?
Thank you, Jed. I think I'm also a real boy, but I don't think I'm necessarily a special guest, but thank you nonetheless, Jed. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. As Jed said, I am from Info Exchange here in Australia, and we're trying to do a tremendous amount of work across the Asia Pacific region, and supporting and facilitating events like this is some of that work. Thank you, Jed.
Thanks, Matt. So moving back, the content we're delivering today is a team effort. It's a collaboration between Matt and their team in Info Exchange, as well as RT and our other partners. What we want to do really is we want to build this through the APAC AI learning community, which is a 100% free online platform that you can join. You can join here to access more educational content. So please sign up. More information about that later, but part of how we're able to deliver the session is because of this project. So moving forward. All right, now onwards towards the session itself. What does it mean to use AI responsibly? Much like the funny thing about it is when I was thinking about this session, it kind of eerily felt like, when you're starting to date somebody and you don't know how to kind of like behave around that person because you haven't defined the relationship. I'm not sure if it only applies to me as a millennial. I hope you kind of relate to that question. But it's similar to any new tool, such as AI. You don't know the limits of that relationship. You don't know what's appropriate, what's how to behave properly. And that's what we want to do today. We want to be able to understand how we're going to behave with AI by defining that relationship. Now, in order to define that relationship, we want to unpack or reflect really on these three key talking points. The way we're going to start is let's first understand, okay, how are we as a sector right now, how are we working with AI? How are nonprofits' relationship with AI? Following that, because we're dealing with such an arbitrary concept, which is ethics, responsibility, right or wrong, we want to have some clear shared guidance. How do we navigate that conversation? How do we determine what's right or wrong? That being said, we have a framework that we can use universally, regardless of where we are, our relationship or skills with AI. We can use this framework to help create some guidance as to what constitutes responsible AI use. And finally, we don't want to just keep it as a theory. Let's talk about practical use cases. Let's look into everyday scenarios where we can apply that. Now, before we kick off, I just want to give a quick heads up. Give me the first 5 to 10 minutes to just talk, right? That's going to be us discussing. But I want you to be as equally involved later on. As we go through the framework, that framework is only as good as how you're going to interact with it. That being said, there are a lot of reflection questions there, and I want you to provide us feedback, share your thoughts about those guide questions, because that's actually how ethics or any AI governance or any actually tech governance topics actually bear fruit, by actually responding to questions. So at the latter half of this session, I would like you, or actually would highly encourage you to share your feedback, share your thoughts over chat, because that what matters here is us having that dialogue around what is responsible and what is not responsible. Right? That being said, let's go on to the JED lecture if it also we can get that out of the way. All right. So first part, what is AI? So if you weren't able to join us last week, a quick recap. So in reality, or in its most simplest sense, AI, towards moving towards Gen AI, is really machines mimicking human intelligence. That's broken down into three mental activities, right? Learning, being able to learn about data, inferring, creating assumptions about what happens next, and reasoning. Not only will AI give you an answer, it will also give reason or logic behind that answer. Now, historically, those three mental processes applied in towards machines were really just used for basic structured data. For example, a Sudoku puzzle, right? Any structured sets of data that has clear data and patterns, that was the original application of AI, which is what we referred to then as machine learning. But data in reality is more than just numbers, shapes, or clear sequences. There's a lot of complexity behind reality. Photos doesn't have patterns, speech patterns, and so on and so forth. So once we incorporated more complex unstructured sets of data, such as art, the way we speak, natural language, that's when AI grew from machine learning to deep learning, where deep learning now mimics the complexities of human thinking to the point that we can't even describe how it works or how it arrives to an answer, right? So this is where Gen AI came about because it's able to now learn, infer, and reason using complex sets of data. It's now able to also mimic that and create similar outputs. That's why Gen AI can give us blog posts, artworks, etc. So that's how Gen AI came about. So just a quick recap if you didn't join us. Also, I realized I could have completed that entire 60-minute session in one slide, but here we are, right? That being said, okay, how does this apply? Now, we understand how skilled AI is. Moving forward, how has nonprofits taken on towards AI? How have we adopted it? What are our sentiments as a sector? For this slide, I'll be referring to data coming from two key data sets or data sources. A survey by TAP Network together with TechSoup, primarily for US-based organizations, as well as a similar project in Europe and Africa, also by TechSoup, where they surveyed nonprofits about AI use. So just be mindful that while these are specific to certain regions, I could imagine that the implications of the data is somewhat universal because we do share a lot of commonalities as a sector. So first, the key thing that we learned as our team surveyed organizations predominantly from the US is that AI is seen by nonprofits as the great equalizer, and that 90% actually sees AI as really giving us that extra hand to deal with, for example, how understaffed we are, or dealing with repetitive work, or our backlogs, etc. It's been seen to improve efficiency and productivity, really showing how positive the outlook is towards AI, particularly coming from a nonprofit context. Following that, so where do nonprofits typically apply AI? The immediate answers has been predominantly for communications, for example, tailoring messaging, marketing content, blogs, etc., and also data analysis and research. Research being some support to our grant writing, if we need to build a narrative framework around our applications, and also data analysis in the sense, more basic data analysis, say, going through our spreadsheets of donors, analyzing patterns in, say, contributions and donations and whatnot. Now, overall, it's painting a very rosy picture, right? Very positive outlook towards AI. But in fact, despite that, nonprofits are still very cautious in adopting it. We see the positives, but we don't want to go all in yet. We're still very cautious in adopting it. Despite the overwhelmingly positive outlook towards AI, majority of adoption cases have largely been isolated to individual use cases. And by that, I mean, it's never a concerted effort organized by the organization. Rather, you may have one or two staff that are interested and have taken it upon themselves to start using AI with a mix of personal and professional work. It's never been really a concerted effort in that sense. That being said, it's still being very cautiously adopted by nonprofits as a whole. Rather, it's predominantly individual efforts. Now, what's holding us back? It's overwhelmingly positive. What's holding us back towards going all in on AI? Well, the same research from our European and African team found three key things we want to reflect on. Naturally, first, funding. Well, as nonprofits, we kind of understand why. Do we need to elaborate further on funding? But outside of the costs of the technology itself, it's also cost of upskilling, right? The cost in time of training and adopting. It goes well beyond just the dollar figure, but also about the implications in time and also effort. So 74%, or majority actually, were worrying about potential costs of implementation. Second, very close, was skills. As positive as it is, as exciting as it is, if we don't know how to operate it or get started, well, what's the value? And a lot of nonprofits actually flag that. Well, great promises, but how do we get there? How do we get to a point where we can confidently say, oh, yeah, I can do that too? 68% cite lack of skills or staff training, which also probably is an outcome of funding constraints as well. Another blocker towards adopting AI as a whole. But the key thing we want to focus on, because honestly, funding constraints, skills gaps, that's why we're here, right? We're here to help you find tech donations that can address some of the funding constraints. We're here right now to have available upskilling sessions such as this, so we can address that to a certain degree. The critical thing we want to focus on today is this one, missing governance. 76% doesn't have AI strategies, 80% lack AI use case policies. Now, this sounds a bit too niche, right? You may be wondering, well, Jed, what's the point of that? The point of highlighting this third one is that it actually addresses a critical thing. AI use policies reflect our understanding of what's responsible and what's not. That's why we want to hone in on that. And also, this key thing here is probably the lowest barrier of entry. We can immediately get this sorted out, even for us internally. So having an AI policy, having a shared understanding of what's responsible or acceptable use or not, that's something we want to hone in today, because ultimately, This will also determine how you're gonna, build use cases, understand what you want to invest in, understand what time or effort you want to commit to for training, right? But let's unpack that because governance is such a big concept, it's such a complex word to just throw out there, right? So let's unpack how you want to approach that. Let's break it down. In reality, AI governance, I'm not just referring to that policy, that 100-page document that your HR sends to you on day one, you forget about it on day two, and then you get flagged about it on day three, right? So it's more than just having that documentation. Rather, my stance here is that it's having a shared conversation with your team about a couple of key things. First, what are we using and how are we using it? This is very important for a tool that is almost omnipotent, really. You can ask Gen AI to do whatever, but the idea is, well, where do we draw that line? And also, how do we know that the tools we're using are actually safe, right? So the first question you want to ask is, what tools are we using? And what do we want to do with these tools? The second component, and if you joined us last week, 2 weeks ago, one of the most critical components about Gen AI is its relationship with data. It lives on data. The reason why it works the way it works is because of access to tons of data. That being said, there's nobody exempt from that relationship. So as you talk about tools, as you talk about use cases, you also want to ask yourself, because of the scenario that we're looking at, how we're using or planning to use AI, in that situation, what data will AI use? What data will we permit it to use? And who owns that data? What is our responsibility towards the owners of that data or us as nonprofits? What is our responsibility towards that data, right? So you also want to ask that. And finally, ultimately, who's responsible? And we'll unpack that in a bit. But one thing that we also want to understand is that we keep forgetting that AI is not a real person, that AI is a reflection of what we commanded it to be, right? It's great and all because it's so potent that we think it's an actual resource, but in reality, it's really just a reflection of our prompts, particularly speaking about AI in a more everyday use case scenario. That being said, it's always important to draw a line that if we get bad outputs, can you blame that on AI? It's almost similar to that adage of the dog eating my homework, yeah, right? Like, because you didn't submit it to your teacher. So that's also an important thing that we want to talk about. Ultimately, all of these questions, all of those 5 questions, it all boils back to square one, which is what does it mean to use AI responsibly? So what I showcased there is that AI policies, yes, it's a massive document, but you can break it down into these bits and pieces. And that's what we're going to do in the next half of this discussion. We're going to break down the concept of responsible AI use into something easily digestible, easy to facilitate a conversation around, so you can start making or building or laying those foundational bricks towards arriving at a strong AI use case policy or a responsible AI use policy. All right. So now, how do we arrive at that framework? Here is where I'll introduce you to NAIC. NAIC offers a universal framework that we can use to facilitate that conversation. But before that, let's pull back. The important thing about having a framework as we move forward is this. Our relationship with AI, it varies almost for everybody. Each one of us, we all have our own different levels of skills with AI, preferences of tools. We all have different levels of attitudes towards AI and also expectations and understanding of, what's realistic. The reason why I'm highlighting all of these variables is that it all boils down to one thing. This is why it's very difficult to have this conversation as a group. You may be very excited about it. Your manager may be fully pessimistic about it. There's no room for sympathy there, right? There's no room for harmony because we all have different expectations. That being said, having a framework such as what NAIC offers gives us at least that universal foundation of where we can, start facilitating a more constructive conversation about responsible AI use. That being said, these next few slides is where I would like you to interact through chat. Maybe you want to unmute if you have time. But the reality is that we'll use NAIC to act as our universal jump-off point. NAIC's framework, I just want to be mindful, will not provide you answers. Rather, it will provide you with 6 universal talking points that can at least help you arrive at a compromise for your entire team as to what constitutes responsible AI use. Okay? So, in the next few sessions, we'll dedicate it to identifying and unpacking these 6 universal talking points. And I want you to join me here, and I want you to respond over chat, because a lot of these will be reflection questions, okay? So here, your thoughts matter. I'm very keen to hear about what your thoughts are. And part of this is as we unpack these 6 components, we'll also give you some sample situations where they apply, and that's where I want to get your feedback on, all right? So first key component, accountability. That's where we ended earlier, right? Who is responsible? So when we're talking about AI, it's always important to understand, okay, who is actually accountable for what? There are 2 ways you can look at this. First, who is accountable for leading the AI adoption initiatives within your organization, right? Who will lead that training? Who will lead that introduction towards a larger team? Having a conversation about the benefits, risks, etc. That person. We'll refer to that person as the tech champion. But accountability isn't just about, an internal adoption initiative. It's also senior developer. That's a very good one, Ruby. There's also another component to it, which is when AI gets it wrong, well, who do we talk to about it, right? Who is ultimately responsible for that bad output, particularly if it has real-life implications? So let's try to have a more constructive conversation about this, and I'll share a few use cases. Here's my first question to you folks, and I'm very interested to hear what you're going to say here. So, for example, you have a colleague that used AI to summarize a grant FAQ. You know those massive, 100-page documents that specify you're eligible, you're not for a grant application. Now, because it's so long, your colleague used AI to summarize it for you. Now, it mistakenly advised you that your organization is ineligible for that proposal. In reality, you are. In this scenario, is it admissible or is it acceptable to say, I got it wrong because AI gave me the wrong information? So could you let me know over chat, what are your thoughts about this question? Is it acceptable? Is it not? I'll give you a couple moments. Not acceptable. Thank you, Natasha. Not acceptable. So if it's not acceptable, who is ultimately accountable for that bad output? Who should we talk to? Like, hey, that wasn't right what you did. Who should you talk to? Is it the colleague itself? Is it the owner? Yes. Is it the manager of that? And so on. The colleague who got the information wrong. Cool. Other points? Multiple inputs. That's a good one. Diversity of perspective. Prompt has to be accurate. That's another one also. So ultimately, you can see the AI problem statements and response. That's another one. Good one, Ruby. Perfect. So ultimately, a lot of your feedback boils back to the person. Maybe the person's prompt is wrong. Maybe I could even argue you as the recipient of that information. For example, we're the manager, we're leading that grant application. Did we verify that, right? So, but ultimately, I kind of agree with you. It's on that person who gave you that information. It's your role. If AI gets it wrong, it's your role to verify that. Because as we explained 2 weeks ago, AI is never perfect. It has instances where it makes information up, i.e. hallucination. Or maybe your prompt was wrong, so it gave you the wrong packaging of information. Ultimately, it's your role to verify information, and that's why accountability-wise, it's always you, it's on you who did the prompt to verify the output, But then again, we had two perspectives towards accountability, right? One part of it is on a more transactional level on outputs. The second level is more of towards that leading that AI adoption initiative. So here's another question. You're deciding an internal AI champion for your team. Which would have more weight for you? Somebody who has technical understanding of AI or somebody who understands your operations? Now, for this scenario, let's not have a mix. Let's not use that cop out, okay? Let's use A or B, guys. Operations. You go with, come on, man. You gotta choose one. Operations. We can't choose both, folks. So let's assume we don't have budget for both. We can only choose one. Operations, thank you. So operations. Okay. So a lot of you, I feel like, are leading towards operations. I am in the same boat because ultimately, uh, understanding of AI can be developed. And the tricky thing as well is that I don't even know AI fully understands its thought process. That being said, what is important is your operation. Now, they're both equally relevant, but I would lean towards somebody who understands their operations because that understands the nuances of okay, your responsibility towards your stakeholders, the challenges that you want to address, and how it impacts your team. So AI is a solution. You can learn about the solution. Your operations is a dynamic between humans, which is very difficult to put into words, put into a data set that AI could fully comprehend. So equally valuable, but always prioritize some understanding of your dynamic with your team, your stakeholders, and your actual day-to-day operations so that you know how to apply AI realistically that addresses real-life challenges without compromising your relationship with your stakeholders because it will open questions about data use later on. All right? How understanding of AI is separate. We have to see how. Yes, thank you very much, Ruby. Great point there. So good interaction so far. Now we have 5 more to go, actually. So I hope you bear with me. So the first one is accountability. To recap, it's accountability towards A, the output. Are you verifying whether that's legitimately correct or not? And B, also the accountability towards leading that charge. AI skills can follow. A deep understanding of your operations should be prioritized if you don't have that skill yet. So, second part, impact. So when we say impact, maybe a lot of you would gravitate towards, well, this is going to save me 80% of my day-to-day workload, so I can focus on something more strategic. That's always been the selling point of AI or any new technology for that matter, right? Efficiency so you can focus on something more strategic. Here, it's something different. The way we want to approach impact is who's actually affected by us adopting AI or adopting AI-enabled workflows. So let's pull back. Here's a sample case to help you reflect on that. For example, you're a small organization, you have 5 staff members, you need to hire people. So part of that, hey, I can't do this, I have too much on my plate. I'm finance, HR, IT, and also somebody who goes door to door to fundraise. Not a lot of free time in your day to day. That being said, managing or reviewing 100 plus applications for another staff member, that's a lot to ask for. That being said, you created an AI agent, a custom GPT, an agent, or a gem to help you at least do a first pass. So what you're doing is you created an agent. You're going to upload all of the CVs there and give that agent the criteria. Okay, this is the job description. Could you create a shortlist for me? From an impact, operationally speaking, sounds promising. What would have been 3 to 5 days of work reviewing 100 plus applications, kind of like stripped back to a couple of hours. Great. But before we move forward, let's first address this first question. If we proceed with this, who's going to be impacted by this process? So could you let me know over chat? Job applicants, the whole organization, end of the day, making things easy and efficient. Yes. Both job seekers and organization. Okay. Now, hold on to that thought. Knowing who's going to be impacted, what's the potential impact, both negative and positive, to that stakeholder? Let's start with job applicants. How would you feel if your CV is being reviewed or initially by AI? Not happy, okay? Apprehensive, okay? Any positive thoughts about that scenario if you were the job applicant? I fully understand why you're not going to be a quicker response, maybe, yeah. Now, what if you are the HR lead and somebody proposed this to you? Let's create an agent, do a first pass on all the job applicants. How would you feel if you are the HR of that organization? Impact kind of no bias, unbiased. So if you are the HR, grant work reduced, perfect. Loss of power. I'm not sure what you mean there by loss of power. So if you could elaborate through chat, that would be appreciated. Aware of a big responsibility in getting this right. Perfect. Thank you. Fear of losing job. That's a good one because that was your primary role, right? Now a robot is taking over. So what I'm trying to say here is that whatever HR feel, okay, gotcha. Here it feels. So initial matching and screening done effectively. Perfect. So to pull back, what I'm trying to point out here is that whatever initiative you introduce, it will ultimately have an impact. Us having this conversation about who does it impact, how does it impact that process, it's really important to identify that as for a risk management perspective, right? You want to be prepared for those scenarios. And having this open conversation ahead of time about who's going to be impacted and how is going to be critical for us to map mitigation steps. And most importantly, it will roll over to this next part, which is risks. Now, let's try to distinguish this from impact. When we talk, it is AI's impact going outwards, which is to us, the stakeholders. How does it impact us as people involved in that process? Risk is more of a technical matter. When mistakes occur, what made AI fail? Or if we go back to 2 weeks ago, remember there are a couple of things that determine the output of AI, which is the quality of your prompt, the likelihood of data bias, and also the likelihood of AI hallucinating or us being able to identify when it does hallucinate. So here we're no longer talking about impact towards us as stakeholders. Rather, from a technical perspective, what could cause AI to fail and how and what would happen if it does fail? So let's unpack that by showing a quick introduction. Let's use that job application case again. So consider, okay, you want to create that custom GPT to take a first pass at those applicants. Now, what potential mistakes can AI commit and what would have made that possible? I'll give you easy samples while you think about it. One thing, because I've actually experimented with this a bit. So one thing that could go wrong is that if your job description says, okay, strictly college graduate, now it doesn't really specify work experience, right? But somebody applied who's the perfect candidate experience-wise, but never graduated, it would not adapt to that situation. In that case, there's something wrong with the data that's informing that agent because the job description may have not fully captured that nuance, right? So using that as a springboard, are there other risks involved? And what are those risks involved if you do move ahead with that custom GPT or custom agent? Choosing the wrong AI tool, that's one. Did you think of other possible risks from more of a technical standpoint? The wrong prompt, yes. Correct prompts. Wrong profiling, that's a very good one. And that goes towards the likelihood of bias. Another one as well is it's more of kind of like an edge case, but after like 200 applications in the same chat, would it still be accurate or would it have hallucinated, right? Because that's always a likelihood. You can always tire it out as well or get things muddled in that chat. But I also want to, if we have not provided correct sets of data to AI response, that's a good one. It's a good one. It is a bit of a waste of time if you'll actually end up just reviewing and arguing with the output. So it's all about the data that you provided it. For example, the job description. Did you itemize things accurately? Have you comprehensively provided it with considerations that capture the nuance of between, for example, earlier, the interplay between educational achievement and experience, right? These are things that are really hard to put into paper at times. So you can lead to biased outputs, such as wrong profiling. Now, that's what we're getting at here. Outside of the impact towards the stakeholders, it's also about understanding what could go wrong at a technical level. The likelihood for bias, the likelihood of AI to hallucinate, and having that guardrail to identify, okay, to help you identify whether it's getting it wrong and so on. So my last question for this is, okay, knowing what mistakes it could commit, let's focus on prompts. Let's focus on wrong prompts, right? What would be a possible safety measure or guardrail or that one line that you can add to that prompt when you ask it to initially scan, say, 20 job applications based on that job description you provided it? What would be a good safety line to add? What do you think? I'll give you an easy sample. It could be strictly refer to information on the CVs. Do not make information up that is not reflected in these CVs. Because hallucination is a likelihood, right? Are there any similar safety nets? Validate, perfect. Terms and conditions? If you could elaborate more on that, Sudha, I would appreciate it. Strict scoring rubrics, that's a very good one. Yes, giving it a framework that will reflect your thought process. Give it a set of concrete criteria. Thank you very much. That's a very good one. So as you can see there, one of the ways to manage risks is by setting up guardrails. A good one is providing it with a strict framework that it can operate in so that you're aligned in your thought process, right? Also, validate, review the output, right? Sometimes the guardrail doesn't even have to exist in the prompt. It should be with you. Just a reminder personally, like, check the output, man. Like, just as simple as that. So, being mindful of time, that's the third component. Example case, another one. So, the fourth one. Yeah. For example, you started rolling out AI. The fourth one is all about communication. Now, I want to highlight communication is a very comprehensive term here as well. As you use AI, who needs to know? Who needs to know about the involvement of AI in certain tasks? I'll give you a good example. For example, you are a nonprofit that works with scholarship applications. Now, maybe you primarily use emails or your website to capture inquiries. School season, a lot of inquiries about scholarship applications. It's getting hard to manage. So you want to set up an AI chatbot to help you address that. Now, that chatbot is responsible for answering basic questions about a scholarship fund. As you roll that out, who needs to know that AI is involved in that process, that you are interacting with an AI chatbot and not with an actual human? Is it important to inform people as well? So those two questions. The users, perfect. No, interesting. So you feel, Ruby, your thought is it shouldn't be necessarily be important. I'll give you a variation of this. Respect data privacy and confidentiality. User need not to know. Okay. I'll give you another variation of this example. And this was more of a theoretical question. I forgot who I was talking to about this. If you're writing an email and you use AI to draft that email, it doesn't have to be sensitive. Do you need people to know that AI drafted that email for you? Now, what I'm trying to call out here is it's actually hard to have a right answer. This is where the variables come into place. But the important part is we're having this conversation and that you're able to elaborate why it's important and why it's not important. We all have different uh, tendencies or attitudes. But what I will say about this is it's important at a certain point in time and at a certain activity. Maybe it's not important if it's something as simple as locating FAQ pages, not necessarily sensitive. But as soon as you involve, say, okay, for you to qualify for this educational fund, you need to give me your address. What is your financial background? Now, this is where we start to ask questions of, okay, somebody needs to know. Somebody needs to know that this is an AI chatbot to give them a sense of ownership of their data and also whether they're comfortable sharing that data with a robot, right? What do you do in it? What do you do when the AI chatbot is called the human name? That's also a pretty good example, Matt. Part of this is just navigating at what range does it become important. My personal take here, and you guys may have different attitudes towards it, and I'm always welcome for you to share it over chat, is my take, when sensitive personal information has started becomes slowly involved, that's when you actually need to put to be more upfront, right? If you're starting to collect information that is personally identifiable and you're having AI uh, work on that data, that's where you have to be very upfront that, hey, AI is actually involved here. Do you consent to that, right? Now, that's my personal thing. I'm really curious, what are your thoughts there? So here's another question. It's also about having conversations with us internally. For example, your nonprofit works in Google Workspace. Now, one of the key things you realize is that, hey, I have my personal Claude account under my personal email, and it's better in analyzing my spreadsheet of, scholarship applications. Do you need to disclose that to your team, for example? I'm going to open that conversation. Oops. Would you need to disclose that information if you're using your own personal AI tool uh, for work-related purposes? Yes, I would like to know it. Okay, that's good. But from an internal perspective, say you're dealing with an internal, like say a spreadsheet, application, job applications, and whatnot. Would you be comfortable with sharing that information? If you're dealing with yes, it's a good one. Thank you. So my point here is that as you go beyond, you need to expand the concept of communication. Outside of communicating with external stakeholders, you also have to communicate tools. Part of AI policies is being able to track or monitor the tools that you're using because it lives and feeds on data. Personal accounts aren't protected by enterprise grade security. So that personal Claude tool may be learning data using personally identifiable information, using data sets that you're responsible for as an organization, right? So that being said, this is where privacy comes into consideration. So outside of communicating to stakeholders, I mean external stakeholders, it's also about having conversations internally as to what tools you're using. So I noticed we're running short in time, so I'm going to move faster here. So the next one is about tests. When you receive AI's outputs, how will you know if it's correct, right? Or really just, sanity checks. For example, let's go back to that same instance. You're using an AI agent to, say, clean a spreadsheet of donor records. Now, your manager is a bit hesitant. How will you conduct this test safely to prove to your manager, hey, it actually works? Could you share some instances where, or some sample approaches to this? As you think about that, one of the key things that I can share here is as you do tests, it's always important to be mindful of the tool you're testing on. And I've alluded to this earlier, where if you have an enterprise tool or a business tool, such as Google Workspace, Microsoft 365 for nonprofits, it's always important to conduct tests using those environments because they're protected by enterprise grade security. That means whatever prompt or data you share within that environment, that AI tool will not use whatever it's learned from that process towards other prompts. And another thing, if you're going to test with, say, potentially sensitive information, try observing two things. A, removing personally identifiable information or anonymizing your data sets. Or B, my personal favorite, have AI create mock sets of data, create synthetic or fake data to play around with. Ultimately, what you want to test is the process, right? The data can change. So as long as that process works and you identify the gaps, that should be more than enough to at least move forward, right? Now, I'm going to move forward a little faster because I'm being mindful that we only have 13 minutes left. The last part here is control. The question here is about just remaining in control as a human. Because of how capable AI is, it's sometimes easy for us to forget that we still need to play an active role there. Sanity checks on outputs, making sure that it's not hallucinating, making sure as well that we're not being overly reliant on it, right? Having that clear line or boundary. That being said, you want to rephrase that question into as you begin implementing or using AI in your work, how has AI changed your responsibilities as part of that function, right? I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, for grants, if your role before was maybe researching for funding opportunities, but your manager said, hey, let's create an AI agent for that. How does that change your role? Now, I'm going to try to give that feedback now so we can go towards a Q&A. But the idea there is that as you automate certain parts, your role changes more towards vetting, direction setting. You still own that prompt ultimately. So that's your role. Now, from a more creative perspective, if you manage, say you're the comms person and you typically manage newsletters and social media captions, now, if somebody said, oh, we'll create an AI agent to create drafts, well, then your role there is to vet that output. Does it resonate with our voice? Does it match kind of like our tone, our corporate tone and whatnot? So it's really just being mindful that AI is inevitable, but it's also a matter of you finding your role in that conversation. You're never really going to be ultimately pushed out. What you need to do is you need to evolve with that. That being said, remember when we wrapped up the session 2 weeks ago, you still have a role in vetting and direction setting because ultimately AI is a reflection of your intention, your need for data and your data. That being said, you still have a role there. All right. You just need to evolve with it. Now, we don't have enough time for this, but I'm going to send this deck with you. I created a sample here that you can, and I would highly recommend that you use this sample and try to have a conversation about this with your team. It's a sample of if it's an orphanage is exploring the use of AI functions and its implications on data privacy and so on. I want to leave more time for questions, so I'm going to skip over this and I'm going to leave this as sort of homework for you to facilitate this conversation with your team. It uses the same six components of the NAIC framework. Now, as we wrap up, also, don't be stuck with the sample that I provided to you. I know you all have your own interesting use cases. Use those use cases as context for your framework discussion, all right? Think about those ideas that you have, what you want to automate, and ultimately use the NAIC framework to guide your conversations internally. We don't want to hinder progress. What we want to just say is it doesn't hurt to pull back and ask questions now rather than when things are burning or somebody's complaining, right? So hold back, pull back, ask questions, then progress as you arrive at, shared answers and attitudes towards it. Now, We don't want this to be the end. We have 6 more sessions, and before we move towards Q&A, just a reminder, we've created this content as part of the AI and learning community. There's a lot more in store for you in that community. You can take an AI persona test to get personalized learning paths. We can help upskill your team through opportunities like this and other webinars. We offer AI assessments for your team and also for any AI solution that you can think of. We can check whether it's feasible or ethical. And finally, there's mentoring. There's 10 hours free mentoring. Guys, it's free. So go for it, right? So 90% free to join. You have this QR code, scan it. I'm not sure if it matters, but it's available in different languages. So yes, please don't let your AI journey stop in these webinars. Engage with us. We're happy to help you progress your ideas and your plans for AI adoption. I'm going to shut up now because I think you may have questions. So if you have questions, just sing out. There's a good one. How do we detect bias in underlying algorithms? That is interesting, man. Now, I'm not sure how to answer that from the perspective of algorithms. What I will say is that there's a way you can, not really a way, it's more of a hunch on how you can detect it from the output itself, right? Do background checks on that response. For example, if I ask, okay, what's the best pizza place near? No, that's a stupid example to base it on, but bear with me here. What's the best pizza place available? Like say within a 10-kilometer radius from me, and it puts a suspicious entry as a top. Maybe do a background check. Okay, what would have made that happen? Maybe they have a ton of ads. Maybe their SEO is pandering towards AI output generation. So that's one thing. Now, Matt, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have a different approach to detecting bias, whether it's in outputs or in algorithms?
It's a good question. I think the short answer is no. I mean, I think we're very fortunate in Australia, at least, that we don't see as much bias impacting us. I think the bias is coming from a Western-centric perspective and probably has a bigger impact on cultures that perhaps don't speak English as a first language or perhaps are not Western cultures. So I think as the models get better, we're seeing it less and less, but it's certainly prevalent. A few months ago we were talking about if you ask Gemini for a photo of a wedding, um, it was spitting out, a traditional Western wedding, whereas now it seems to be a little bit more balanced, not completely, but a little bit more balanced. So yeah, I think it's just that keeping the human in the loop and checking and making sure that you are really clear in what it is you want, and then really clear in your output as well, what you're putting out there and fielding for that.
Thanks, man. I'm going to add to that as well. There's another perspective towards that there is a level of ownership that you have when biases occur. For example, what was your prompt? If we go back to that job application or job applicant agent, what was your prompt? What was your job description? So there's a level of vetting those sets of data as well that's informing your AI agent or your AI kind of like companion. You always also want to check that. For example, when I did similar tests to that, all of the applicants had glowing reviews because I had apparently I had a very, very low bar as to what constitutes a very good applicant. So it can also happen in that level, right? Always review. So Matt has a really good point, keeping humans in the loop. And at the same time, just being mindful of what information are you providing it. So it's not a direct answer, but I hope that helps. Other questions, folks? Or have I asked too many questions that you kind of like that? That's also an important feedback.
I think those were the important questions, Jed. Anybody want to go live? They can raise
Yep.
your hand. Yeah,
Feel free to unmute.
yeah.
While you think of your questions, just a heads up, in about 2 weeks' time, the next session will be an overview of Gemini. So that will kick off that 6-part series where we unpack Gemini. So I hope you can join us then. And we have a lot of Gemini content in that learning community. So if you're on Google Workspace, book consultations with us, book an AI assessment. Let's kickstart that process. What is more Indian centric, please? So for context, that is referring to the feedback about Notebook LM. So I'm Filipino. I don't have a good answer for you there, Natasha. Other folks, maybe you can share.
I was just going to say the comment was in response to somebody who said that Western voices, and that's true for Notebook LM. It's very Americanized. We don't even have an Australian accent
Accent.
for it yet. We've been promised for months and months and months, but still we get the American accent. So um, I do think that is a particular limitation to that particular tool. Um, I don't know what tools are more Indian centric. I've not been exposed to them, but do you have models coming out of India and tools that are targeted towards the Indian market? I'd be keen to hear.
Yeah, that's a good one. And also, it's not just about the voices, even language patterns. Just quick example, we had that mentoring case where part of the prompt was, okay, this agent has to follow Australian language standards. Yeah, the spelling and lack of that dash. The agent would keep forgetting that. I have to remind it, like, hey, you're Australian. So it will correct the next output. So it's not just, yeah, that's right. It's not just about lack of an Indian voice. It's also apparent with other cultures as well. So probably part of what would be how it would grow later on or how it would develop, as well as maybe there are other tools or models that are built more locally. There are about 2 minutes left. Do you guys have other questions, or have I? Hopefully, I've not dried your brains because of the amount of questions I asked. It's hard knowing that you're approaching lunchtime.
Yeah. Anyone? Please feel free to unmute.
Does APAC have simple AI policy? Yes, and I should be able to help you access that. So Info Exchange does offer, I think, a learning resource that does come with an AI template. Now, what I would highlight is that use that as a kickoff, like a jump off point, but take the time to, again, facilitate a similar conversation and to further customize that template. But I'm happy to share that in the follow up email, RD. I'll share that link so you can share with the
Yeah,
deck.
sure, Jed.
Awesome. Okay, if nothing else, I think we have 1 minute left. So I'll pass the mic back to RD and I'll keep quiet now.
No problem, Jed. If we do not have any more questions, or maybe you want to share it with me later, uh, but before concluding the session, I would like to share the QR code with you so that we can have your feedbacks about this session, how it went well, and what next you want to for us to come back with. And yeah, I think there's one more. There's one more question, Jed. Can our personal information shared with the AI be used by any third party?
It depends if you're connecting other apps. And again, it goes back to having a conversation about what tools is your IT allowing to ensure that, whatever apps you use together with that AI companion, it's being done so in an ethical and in an environment that you are able to control. That being said, the best way to approach that Keep it within a business or enterprise grade account, such as Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. Avoid using personal or free accounts, particularly if you're going to connect third-party connectors or apps, and most especially if you're dealing with company information. So the answer is yes. Keep it safe. Use a professional account.
Yes. I think, yeah, we are on time. So thank you so much, Jet. Thank you so much for the lovely session and for the very interactive audience we have here today. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day ahead. Thank you, Jet. Thank you all, everyone. Thanks, Dia.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Matt. Thank
Thanks for
you.
bearing with me as well and for answering my questions. I appreciate it. I should be the one talking, yet I was the one asking questions. See you in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
Yes, see you.